2, 1.
Relationships in high school suck. Okay, hear me out. Relationships in high school, well, let me see. For one, they're complicated. A mix of long, short, and on occasion, even non-existent. And those aren't even just mine. See, whenever a friend of mine is having some sort of relationship struggle, they come to me. I'm like a relationship guru. And what I realized really helped when talking about their relationships is saying this. Tell me how you feel and write it down. Write a love poem. But after the 11,000th, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I realized that writing a love poem is a lot more complicated than it seems. It's not like writing a grocery list. And although writing a genuine love poem does take work, it is a vehicle to not only understanding our feelings, but also how to communicate them to others. I understand poetry may sometimes seem frivolous, but in the words of Cambridge poetry professor Morag Stiles, poetry says something that lasts, leaves a footprint deep in the earth of what it means to be human. So then I got the bright idea, well, why don't I just write a book on love poetry and ship to all of my friends? But to do that, I needed to know so much more than just, how do you feel? So together, let's journey into understanding love poetry by first learning where love poetry began, then understanding where love poetry is in the modern day, to finally teaching you the basics, and how to compare these to a summer's day. Roses are red, violets are blue. I know the history of love poetry. The first love poem was carved in a clay tablet in 8th century BC in ancient Babylonia. Historians believe it was written to be sung by brides at banquets, weddings, and festivals, and basically says, bridegroom, let me love you. Bridegroom, let me caress you. Your love is honey sweet. And although this poem is so old, love poetry did not take center stage until the revival of the arts in the 16th century, better known as the Renaissance. The reason the Renaissance is specifically important is because it brought us a love poet such as William Shakespeare, who more importantly wrote a collection of 154 sonnets expressing his love and his feelings. His use of beautiful wording and analogy in these sonnets is specifically important because that use of beautiful wording and analogy still resonates in the modern day. From the Renaissance, we jump to the Romantic era, an artistic period full of painting and, more importantly, poetry from authors such as John Keats and William Wordsworth. The Romanticism was not just being romantic in the lovey-dovey sense. The Romanticism was a movement to create art in a manner that put a focus on new emotions, apprehension, terror, horror, and awe. It was used to escape the confines of population growth, urban sprawl, and industrialization. And the Romanticists were not just hipsters before hipsters were cool. They also provided us a way of writing poetry, a new way of writing poetry. This is taking one central idea or emotion and then writing it in a manner that allows the reader to feel that emotion or idea. For example, they would focus on love and make the reader understand love. Okay, now picture this. We skip over a couple hundred years and we arrive to the 21st century. After centuries of painting, architecture, music, poetry, putting an emphasis on new emotions that people are generally afraid of confronting, all of a sudden, boom! In the 21st century, we become confronted with song lyrics about how my anaconda don't want none unless you got buns. Ma'am? In the 21st century, love poetry is highly overlooked in times of teen angst and 5 seconds of summer. Now that we understand the history of love poetry, we need to examine where it is in the modern day. And now that 5 seconds of summer and pop culture has arrived, love poetry is morphed into how she looks so perfect standing there in his American Apparel underwear. But love poetry is more than that. It's a way of expressing your feelings in a way that allows you to rationalize with these feelings. And although it's overlooked, what makes modern love poetry so memorable is that it's relatable. See, I don't know a single person who cannot relate to, you see, I want that my friends think I'm crazy kind of love. That reckless kind of love. That no matter what, you get the best of me kind of love. That you get my heart and my mind and the world gets the rest of me kind of love. I want love. That's a fragment of Rudy Francisco's poem titled To the girl who works at Starbucks down the street on my house on Delmar Heights Road, I swear to God I'm not a stalker. And whether this love of yours works at Starbucks or Denny's or Olive Garden, or it's just in your English class, we all can relate to wanting to be in love. See, in 1943, Abraham Maslow proposed a psychological theory titled Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. Often shown as a pyramid or a triangle, this hierarchy is made up of 4 base fundamental or deficiency needs. These are friendship, security, esteem, and love. And Maslow says that with these 4 needs in hand, we can achieve the 5th need, which is self-actualization, or being comfortable in your own skin. However, if we take these needs away, an individual can not only not achieve self-actualization, but they also become anxious or tense, which isn't something we see physically. But I know that when I don't have my friends by my side, I'm not secure, I have no self-esteem, and I don't feel any love, I'm fairly down in the dumps too. My friends, wanting these 4 base deficiency needs is human nature. That is why expressing these needs, especially love, is so important. And this is how to do it. This brings us to the 3rd part of our speech. How exactly does one do that? Write a love poem and express their feelings. Well, the first step is simple. You can't write a love poem without having someone to write it about. So step 1, pick a subject. Oh yeah, right. From there you can move on to step 2, which isn't as much of a step as it is something to remember as you go on. Be brave. Being brave and honest is a very scary thing to do, I understand that. But if you're trying to either understand your feelings or express them to someone else, and you only go halfway, your message won't be understood. So be genuine, be vulnerable, and be brave. From there you can move on to step 3, which is something you have heard for years when writing. Brainstorm. As fast as you can, legibly write down everything, and I mean everything, that comes to mind when you think about this person. A really helpful tip for this is to be nostalgic. Think about all of your firsts. From there you can move on to step 4, which is to start writing. Take all of those brainstormed ideas and write them down as sentences in a paragraph. As you do this, make sure that those ideas are clear, but not bland. Add something to them. Okay, not sriracha hot sauce. But instead of trying to say something silly in your poem, such as, I liked how you looked that one time, say something more deep and more loving, most of all, more affectionate. Such as, when I saw how you looked on our first date, my body turned into a racquetball court. My heart dropped from my ribcage to my stomach and back again, and I was so love-drunk I had to grab the pillar next to me because I couldn't keep my balance. From there you can move on to step 5. Read your poem aloud and turn it into a stanza. This makes it a real poem because providing that you read it aloud, you will understand that your poem has a meter, or it has a way of sounding when it's read aloud. When you read it aloud, put a break whenever there is a natural break in your speaking. This is taking your long and wide paragraph to a longer but thinner stanza. I understand it sounds like just making a bunch of analogies and hitting the enter key, but it's more than that. Because if you write a genuine love poem, it won't just be analogies. It'll be you expressing your feelings to this person and trying to understand how you feel. From there, it leaves you with one last step, step 6. Keep editing. Keep editing your poem until you are comfortable with what you've written. As you do so, you do have the option to make your poem rhyme if you feel so compelled. But remember that sometimes a non-rhyming poem is even more moving than one that does. If you follow these 6 steps, I promise you will understand your feelings better, and so will the person you're trying to convey them to. So today we covered the history of love poetry, where love poetry is in the modern day, and finally I taught you the basics on how to write a love poem. Love poetry forces us to reconcile with our feelings, which is weird because we live in a society that's generally thought of being hyper-masculine and afraid of confronting our feelings. But that's what makes love poetry so great. It makes the reader rationalize and understand with his feelings, as well as allowing the writer to understand the reader to understand the writer's feelings, as well as beginning to understand their own. So do yourself a favor. Instead of scoffing at the person that writes a love poem, next time, keep your feelings from being pushed down, and don't hide them behind a smile. Step out of your comfort zone and write a love poem. Thank you.